In the last video, I created my wireframe where I'm going to place all of my imagery to go into the website that I'm creating. And so I'll create something that looks something like this. It'll be along these lines. I'm going to have a banner at the top. I'm going to have navigation in the middle, an image on the right, content on the left, and then a footer at the bottom. Now, if you look at this close, this text was actually created in Dreamweaver. Everything else was pretty much created in Photoshop, actually. If you look at this banner at the top, this was actually created in Photoshop. You see that it's an image that I created in Photoshop. These buttons were created in Photoshop. This image was an image that I manipulated and scaled down in Photoshop, and this black bar was done in Photoshop. The blue background was done in Dreamweaver, and this text was also done in Dreamweaver. So we'll do some additional things in Dreamweaver, and we'll put everything together in Dreamweaver, but the basic layout, the basic imagery needs to be created in a program like Photoshop. So I'm going to actually use this guideline from my plan to create my Photoshop file. So the Photoshop file is basically going to be of my website. My whole website, I'm just going to basically create as an image in Photoshop. What I'm going to do to start is I'm going to open up Photoshop, and I'm going to go to File, New, to create a new document. And you see in my documents I have some presets that I can choose from, and we can get something similar to or close to what we want to choose. I'm going to go up to Preset and choose Web, and for my web document I'm going to choose the size, and the closest size I have is 800 by 600, and those units are in pixels, as you notice here. So those units are in pixels. So actually I want this to be 800 by 500, so I'm going to type in 500 for my height. So 800 by 500. You see my resolution is preset to 72 pixels per inch. My color mode's set at RGB, which is good, and so everything else is set as well. The only thing I might change, at times you may have a case where you need to print out a website. If you were to print out a website at 72 pixels per inch, it's going to be a low quality print. So in the future, if you ever think that you might need to print this out, you might want to go ahead and change this to 300 pixels per inch. Most cases 72 will be fine. If you're worried about file size, if you don't have the space to spare on your computer, you can stick with 72. But in my case, in many cases, I do need to print out examples of my websites, so I'll change this to 300 for myself. For the name, I'm going to go ahead and name this. Now, this could be your contacts page, this could be your gallery page or portfolio page. Go ahead and name it whatever you want to name it. So if this was portfolio page, you could name this portfolio. And you'll just keep this all in a separate, the PSD folder, so you'll know that this is your imagery. I'm actually going to call this index, because index or home page, the home page, you could name it home page, but I'm actually going to call this index, and we'll discuss why we're calling the home page index page in future videos. But for now, just trust me. Index is your home page, so I'm going to call this index.html. I'm going to go ahead and save this because I have had Photoshop crash on me in the past. I'm going to go to my folder that I created on my desktop, my DSN110 folder. I'm going to choose the PSD. Remember where we had images? Go in the images folder and go into the PSD. I'm going to go ahead and save this as index.psd right there, and hit save. And hit OK to maximize the compatibility. So now it's set. The only other thing I'm going to do to change, to prepare to create my file, is if you don't see the ruler already, go to View and check where it says Ruler. So go View, check Ruler, so that you see the ruler at the top. And when the ruler comes up, right click on the ruler, and if inches or centimeters or another unit of measurement is checked, go ahead and change that to pixels. So this is going to help you out in just a second. So right click on the ruler itself and change the unit to pixels. So now I'm ready to get started. As you notice, I have a crop tool. The crop tool is the fourth tool from the top in my tool panel. You may have the 2-column panel, which would make the crop tool the third tool from the top in the double column spread. You can just double click this little tool panel, by the way. It makes 2 or 1 column. whichever you prefer. But I'm going to choose the crop tool, click and hold down on the crop tool, and you'll see the slice tool come up. If you've never used the slice tool, or if you have used the slice tool, it might not have done what you expected, but that's what we're going to use to actually create basically our wireframe again in Photoshop, and you'll see what it does in just a few minutes. But I'm going to go ahead and make my wireframe basically like, or make my Photoshop file basically like I made my wireframe. So the top or first slice that I'm going to create, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to start in the top left corner, click in the top left corner, drag down, and you see that you get a little helper. By default, you should get a little helper. If you don't worry about it, but you can make this 800 by 90 pixels just by looking at this guide. Now sometimes this guide jumps around, so I don't really trust this guide, so I'm not going to really use it. I'm just going to kind of stretch out my slice kind of to the edge here, and it's not really the right size. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to double click right in that slice, right in the middle of that slice that I created, and you see that you can name the slice and all that. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to make sure the dimensions are correct by looking at X should be 0, Y should be 0. That's the start of my slice. That's up here in the up top left corner. And then make sure width is 800 and height should be 90. So you can set that right here. If that little helper didn't come up for you, you can set it up right there. I'm going to do the same thing again. Basically, I'm recreating this right here. So the next one is the navbar, which is 25 by 80. Again, you can look at this and kind of get 25 if your mouse will cooperate, and you can click right there and that's good. Or just double click after you kind of make a new one. Type in 800, it should be 825, and the Y value should be 90. Make sure all those are right. Very important to do it right the first time. Make sure all those dimensions are correct. Hopefully I do this right. If I don't, I'll catch it in a second. The next one is 335 by 400, and I've got two of those side by side. So 335 by 200, and then so I'm just basically dragging it out. The X value should be 0 for this one. The Y value should be 115. So this width should be 335, and then the height should be, I'm sorry, that was wrong. The width should be 400, and the height should be 335. Hopefully that's right. And the next one is the images slice. So you can create that. That should be at X is 400, Y is 115, W is the width 400, and the height is 335. That came out right. It's kind of snapped in place for me. And then the last one's at the bottom. That should be the right size if you did everything else right. Just kind of click and drag like I did. It should make it right, but just double check it by double clicking in here. This should be 800 by 50 at 4, and the Y value should be 400. The X value should be 0. So that should be set at just like that. So there's your wireframe basically recreated in Photoshop. I do that. Well, let's see. I'm going to go file save, or save, just save. File save, and I'm going to go ahead and place some of my content in place, and you just place it like you would a normal Photoshop file. You can use multiple layers, you can turn the layers on and off, and you can pretty much ignore these lines as much as you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a few items. I'm going to use the rectangle tool, create a box at the top, just as placeholders for right now. And now go ahead and make a nav bar. I'm just going to make some boxes for now. I'm going to go ahead and change these colors by double clicking on these, and you can place your images in as well, and that will be fine. Weird fills and strokes going on here. So I'll switch back to the move tool, or select tool. Sorry, select tool. You got to go down to this select tool if you're using these rectangle tools, by the way. There's a select tool down here. Path selection or direct selection, either one. And then right here is your stroke and your fill. If you don't use these same tools, if you have other tools that you prefer, that's perfectly fine. I'm just making boxes right now just so I have some placeholders so I can show you what this is doing in just a second. Okay, so let's say we want to may not even want a background for this other side, but let's say we want an image in here. I'm going to go file place and go ahead and place an image that I have. I believe I have some images on my desktop, and really I want those images, well, I'm not going to worry about the images where they're located yet, because I'm going to move them around in just a second. Photoshop, it doesn't always let you see all of your files. You have to choose enable and go down to the very bottom and choose all documents, and then you can choose your image, and then you can choose your image folder, image files from there. Picture I have of a golf tournament, so it's going to be kind of random, but should place your image in. Hold down shift and grab a corner if you need to resize an image at any point. Be sure to hold that shift key down as you do that though. Move it and just hold down shift if you're going to scale it. Otherwise it'll get like squished. Like you don't want it squished. So. And just move it in place. If you need to crop it means cut it. We can do that in just a second. But if you need to crop it, you can move it over. You don't want to squish it again like that. You want to grab a top corner or side corner and hold the shift key down and move it up and down. If you have the rectangles, once you get it placed, by the way, hit enter or return and it will place. And if you have the rectangles on top, that might be helpful in kind of cropping it as well. So I'm gonna make it a couple more a couple more little rectangles here. Try to make them as accurate as possible so they kind of snap in place. And I'll just change the fill just to note where the edges of these different boxes are. And these boxes could be images, they could be boxes like I have, or they could be anything. And they could be text as well. They can contain text. Kind of like what I had in the example I showed. So this text was actually created in Photoshop, so I can do that pretty easily. So, of course, just type masters. Oops. 2014. Select the type just by selecting it. Just like any Photoshop document, change the colors, change the size, change the fonts to whatever you want it to be. And so you can be creative with that. Of course, you want your colors to match. Wow, my colors are not matching, are they? So that's really tacky. So I really want to adjust that before I go a whole lot further. Probably want to create more of a green color since I'm going with this masters theme. It goes back to planning. If you planned well, if you plan this and know the colors you want to use, know the fonts you want to use, this is super easy. If you don't plan very well, it makes it much more difficult for you in the long run. So, got a pretty good start. I'm actually not going to use this box here. I'm actually going to show you what it does. We'll just kind of leave that as a placeholder. But you can make this look however you want. I'm going to make buttons in a future video and show you how to do that in more depth. Just want to show you basic slicing, basic image placement in this video. Save that. Save it one last time as a Photoshop file. So now my Photoshop file is done. It's good. It's saved. All set. Now I'm going to go to File, Save for Web. And this is actually going to make this into the sliced website that I really want, that will be functional and usable by me. And so you have different options in this dialog box to save this for web. You have GIF, you have JPEG, you have PNG. If you have anything you want to be transparent, choose PNG. PNG 128 is of course higher quality than PNG 24. So that's up to you. Do you want it to load fast? Do you want it to load slower and have high quality? That's up to you. GIF is okay to use. The most accepted file type to use for web across all platforms, PC, Windows, all different types of browsers, is JPEG. And so I usually choose JPEG medium. It's kind of in the in-between and pretty fast loading. If I want something to have some transparency to it, I might choose PNG. Okay, so you have some different options in the 4 boxes, and it'll show you the difference. See the difference in JPEG? I don't know if you can see this in the video, but JPEG has a little bit of cloudiness to it around the edges of the text. It doesn't come out that well. This PNG actually, well, it kind of does too. But you have different choices, and it gives you a little preview of each. So actually, I think I'm going to choose PNG in this case, and you can actually choose one of the boxes, any one of the boxes that you want to select, and I'm going to choose this box right here by clicking on it, and I'm going to hit save. This is JPEG low. I'm sorry, I'm going to change that to medium. It says medium on it, and hit save again. And this is very important. I can save images only. I can save HTML and images. I can save HTML only. I only want the images in this case because I'm going to create the HTML in Dreamweaver. So choose images only. Choose settings. Default settings is fine. Choose all slices. So that's really important. Go ahead and go to your drive you created, your folder that you created for this class. Choose the images folder, and I'm going to choose actually I'm going to create a new folder in this case. I'm going to call it slices, or you could choose PSD. Let's do another one called slices. I'll just separate it all, and I've got all slices selected, images only. Hit save. Hopefully that works. Go to my images folder here, my design 110 folder. Go to my images folder, and I'm going to my slices. It actually made an images folder of its own. I'm going to move these around, but you see that it created an index image, another index image, a third index image, a fourth index image, and a fifth index image. I skipped a step. That's okay. I can fix it because I really want to name this. Really want to name this my banner, and I want to make this banner for the index page, so I'm going to name this banner_index. That just helps me keep track of it, so I know that's the banner for the index. I'm going to rename this one, which was the footer. I'm going to name this footer_index. And so on. And then I can move these to the appropriate folders, the banner folder, the buttons folder, the footer folder, and so forth. So Photoshop has created these images for me. Now the step I skipped was where you can actually name those in advance, so you don't have to do all that renaming. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to go File, Save for Web. Excuse me, I'm going to do that this way. I'm going to do that by going to my Slice Select tool. Double click your slice. And right here it says index_1. Go ahead and name that banner and _index. And that way it's going to save the correct file name. Go ahead and name this next one navbar. We're actually going to make buttons, but we'll do that. We'll change this around a little bit in the future. And that's navbar index. Go ahead and name this next one main_index. And so forth. So that's my image _index. Now if you want to change that image name around, you could. You might have multiple images. You might have a slideshow or something else. My footer, index, and so forth. Okay, so that's my images. Now I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to go File, Save As. I'm going to save this as index and save that. Replace that. Hit OK. So that backed up my Photoshop file. Oops. Now I'm going to go File, Save for Web. I'm going to export it one more time as a JPEG medium. You can do PNG again if you decide you want to have that transparency saved. Go to Format, make sure Images Only is selected, all slices is selected, save. You'll replace anything that needs replaced, and it should save your files correctly now. I have some files I need to throw away now because I don't need those index. Those can go to the trash, but these should be correct. So I have navbar, my main, my image, my footer, and my banner. So everything's set. Now I can go back to Dreamweaver and place all my images into my wireframe to create my final website.